everybody, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Lottie and today I am doing my October stats and wrap up. October has both felt like the longest and shortest month for me. I feel like it lasted forever, but it also went by really quickly. It's also been so busy for me. I was obviously a co-host of Spoopathon. I've had a lot going on at work in October. I've been sick twice, right at the start of the month and again right at the end. I'm still not feeling 100%, but you know, we got to do our wrap up. So yes, today I'm doing my stats and wrap up for October. I'm going to be talking through all the books that I read in the month. I'm also going to be going through my reading statistics as well as my readathon statistics, talking through which prompts each of the books I read were for, how many points I got, all that goodness. So let's get on with my stats. In October I read a grand total of 9 books, so I read quite a lot. Those books were equal to 2,923 pages, which is an average of 94 pages per day. So I'm still doing pretty well. I'm really pleased with that. For my star ratings, I read 1 3-star, 6 4-stars and 2 5-star books. So a lot of really good books, but unfortunately a lot of them did kind of just miss the 5-star mark for me. Nothing in particular I read this month was like a new favourite, but I will get to that when I get to that. And that is an average of 4.1 stars per book. October was such a mixed bag for me. In terms of genre, I read 3 fantasy books, 2 romance, 2 horror, 1 contemporary and 1 historical. With my genres, I kind of try and just go for the one that I feel like covers the most of the story, but a lot of the books I read this month were kind of more subgenre-y, if that makes any sense. For media, everything that I read was a physical book, so 9 physical books. I didn't read any audio or ebooks. And for format, most of the books that I read this month were graphic novels, so I read 5 graphic novels, 3 normal novels and 1 was a short story collection. So yeah, a lot of graphic novels in October, which is how I kind of managed to get my body count, I guess, so high. For the age categories, 4 of the books that I read in October were for an adult audience and 5 were for a young adult audience. And finally, in terms of my owned TBR, 8 of the books that I read in October I've hauled in 2022 and just 1 book was from the library, so none of the books I read in October I hauled in previous years. So those are my stats done. Let's do a quick rundown of my readathons. So I participated in 3 readathons in October, the main one being Spoopathon, which was created by Spoopy Hall, and I was a co-host of the team librarian. And I can reveal that the points I got for my team was 1,300 across all of the 9 books. I did complete all 4 waves, I completed all the bonus squares like sprints and city breaks, and I did manage to get to Spoop Tech headquarters. So hopefully we have saved Brad collectively throughout the readathon. I guess only time will tell. Another readathon I participated in was the Royal Readathon, and this round was Team Villain versus Team Princess, and this readathon is created by Becca from the Becca Fowl and Liv from Live in Magical Bookland. So I was on Team Villain for this round and I did get a total of 850 points for my team. I completed pretty much all of the prompts for this readathon. The only thing that I didn't manage to do was read the team book, which was Malice by Heather Walter, and the main reason I didn't do that is because I've already read it. I was considering on asking Becca if I could read the second book, Miss Rule, and still sort of count it for that prompt, but I didn't get to it anyway, so I didn't bother asking her to find out if that was something I could have done. But yeah, I completed most of the criteria for this readathon. And the last readathon that I participated in October was Gothtober. I will leave a link to the Twitter for that one because it's hosted by a bunch of lovely people. And for this one we had a game that would select the prompts for us to complete. So this was the graphic I had for my prompts, and I can confirm that I did fulfill all of my prompts. So I will go through which prompts were for which book in a moment. That's that done. Let's get on to the books. The first book that I read in October was Fairy Tale by Stephen King, and this was the book that I had borrowed from the library. So for Spoopathon, the prompts I used this book for were favourite trope, dark magic and a 5-star prediction. For Royal Readathon I used it for the Ursula prompt, which was to read a book featuring magic or witchcraft, and I also used it for disability ref. And then for October, I used it for the beautiful book prompt. So I rated this 3 stars in the end. This was quite a long going book for me. I started it in September and I finished it in October, and in the end I just found it to be really average. It is a fantasy book following a kind of quest plotline with a chosen one character, and the first half of the book takes place in the real world, and then the main character finds a portal to this magical place, very much like a high fantasy type place, and he spends like the rest of the book there. The first half of the book I really enjoyed. I liked the mystery of this well where the portal was, and the way the main character developed a relationship with the old man who's kind of been looking after this well. The main character, I can't remember his name, and then the old man that he was like caring for. I really enjoyed their dynamic, and I thought they were really well fleshed out characters. But then the second half of the book, after our main character goes into the well, into the portal world, I just felt like it was overdone. I'd seen it before. Our main character really, his personality started to change, which I didn't really like, and there was such an influx of new characters for us to meet, and we didn't spend a lot of time with any of them, so I didn't really like any of them or enjoy seeing them on page. I felt like the overarching plot, once we had gone to the portal world, very predictable, and I just didn't care for it. I expect a lot more from Stephen King. He's so far into his career, and I know he's not written loads of fantasy, but he has definitely written fantasy in the past, and I just felt like it was really predictable, overdone, and that I'd seen it before. I've seen much more interesting stories from debut authors, so I was just really quite disappointed. The second book I read in October was Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This was technically the first book that I finished in October, but the second book I started in October. So this is a really short graphic novel about a werewolf and a vampire who start a little relationship with each other, and it's very much sort of short comic style storytelling. Each panel or each page kind of has a little snapshot of their lives, and I enjoyed it. It was only 100 pages though, so I do wish it had been a bit longer and a little bit more fleshed out, I suppose. So I did rate it 4 stars because I did quite enjoy it, and I loved this edition of it as well, with the black sprayed edges and like the cloth boundness of it all, and there's a little slip on the back that you can remove that has a little quote on it. It says "I want your blood" with love crossed out there. So yeah, I did really quite enjoy this. I just felt like it needed to be longer, and that I wish that the stories themselves had connected a little bit more, but it was very cute. I love Sarah Anderson's art style. She's the same person who does the Sarah Scribbles comics that you probably see quite a lot online. I really enjoyed it. It was perfect for getting me into the Halloween mood. So for Spoopathon, this fulfilled quite a lot of the Wave 1 prompts. I used it for favourite trope, blood red, obviously, demonic, 5-star prediction, a host rec. I have previously heard India talk about this book quite highly, and also it was set over Halloween. There is a small part in the comic itself that takes place during Halloween, so I felt like it was enough to count for that prompt. For Royal Readathon, I used it for the Hades prompt, which was to read a book with mythology. Vampires and werewolves are deeply rooted in mythology, even if it's not one particular culture. And for Gothtober, I used it for the gothic mood read prompt because it was a mood read. Not necessarily a gothic fiction book, but the vibes of it all, like it's about vampires, it's about werewolves, the physicality of this book itself is very gothic, so I feel like it was enough to count it for that prompt. The next book that I read was Sad Ghost Club by Liza Meddings, and this is another graphic novel which I thought was going to be very spooky, but it's actually kind of more a commentary on your mental health and about reaching out for help when you are really struggling. The main character, SG, which I'm assuming stands for Sad Ghost, suffers from depression and anxiety, and they are invited to a party and go to this party and feel like they're really like stupid, like they don't really want to be there, and they meet someone else who is like a ghost and is going through the same things as them, and they kind of start to form a little bit of a friendship. So I rated this one 4 stars as well. I enjoyed it, but I feel like it hadn't really got much of a plot. It was very much just a commentary on mental health and what you can do to reach out to people, which if I had been younger, it definitely would have helped me in that way, but I feel like everything that it talked about was something I already knew, and it didn't change the fact that yes, if you are struggling, the best thing you can do is reach out, but it didn't really help with the fact that it's really hard to reach out to people and to say I need help, and I feel like it didn't really touch on that sort of side of it and how difficult it actually is to take that step. I don't know if the second and third one would comment on that a little bit more, but in general I feel like it was more a self-help book than a fictional graphic novel. I did think it was actually about ghosts as well, and although the main character kind of wears a sheet like a ghost, they aren't actually a ghost, so I think the ghost thing is more of a metaphor for how the person is feeling rather than being an actual ghost. So for Spookathon, the prompts I used it for were first person narrative, read in a day and reminds me of a host. The host that this reminds me of is Christy, and also I used it for the spooky prompt. For Readathon, I used it for the Yzma prompt, which was read a book with a sidekick, and the main character has a cat and also a pet frog that I kind of counted as the sidekick for that, and I also used it for the mental health rep bonus prompt. And for Gothtober, I used it for the disability rep prompt because mental health and depression, anxiety, etc. I feel fall under the disability umbrella. So then I picked up the Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare, which is a short story collection all about Magnus Bane, who is one of the main characters in the Shadowhunters world. So I read this, of course, as a part of By the Angel Long, which was originally created by the Becca Fell, and this is the penultimate book we're reading this year for this read along. I really enjoyed this. I rated it 4 stars, and I think the main reason I missed a star for me is because I don't particularly love the short story format, and I kind of wish the short stories had a little bit more flow into each other, but they are sort of snapshots throughout Magnus Bane's life, so it was kind of, I suppose, difficult to really make them flow that way. And there were also a few stories in there that I just didn't really enjoy quite as much, which would have brought the rating down as well. So it's kind of difficult to talk about this because there isn't a particular plot, but it does follow Magnus Bane's life. We start off with the first story in about 1791, and we go right up until the beginning of the Mortal Instruments series, kind of also part way through that actually. I loved it. I loved seeing Magnus Bane's life. I especially loved the stories that took part around the time of the Infernal Devices series, as well as the modern ones where he is interacting with Alec. I just really enjoy seeing Magnus Bane. He's such a fun character. I can't wait to see more from him throughout the rest of the Shadowhunters series. He's just such a great character. Considering the time that the first Mortal Instruments book was written as well, it's so liberating, I guess, to see such an openly queer character on the page back in like 2007. I really wish that I had like started to read that series when I was a lot younger, because I really think it would have been just so cool to see someone who was so openly queer in children's fiction. So for Spookathon, I used this for the favourite genre prompt because it's fantasy, which is my favourite genre, the inhuman prompt, the witches prompt. Magnus is a warlock, but I feel like that can fall under the witches umbrella. And I also used it for the spooky prompts because it is kind of a little bit like spooky with the downworlders and, you know, vampires and werewolves and witches and all that jazz. For Royal Readathon, I used it for the Ursula prompt. Once again, I used it for the LGBT bonus prompt and the POC bonus prompt. For Gothtober, I used it for LGBT and Portrait of a Victorian Aesthetic. Now, I didn't 100% understand what this prompt meant, but because several of the stories in this took place during the Victorian era or kind of post-Victorian era, I'm going to count it in that way because I don't really understand what that prompt is. Then I picked up Bahara Store by Grady Hendrix, which is a standalone adult horror about what is essentially a haunted IKEA. So I rated this 4 stars as well. I really did enjoy it. I just feel like the horror took too long to kick in, and when it did happen, I felt like it happened really quickly. And I would have liked it to be a little bit more paced out better, maybe a little bit more creepiness more towards the beginning of the book itself as well. So yeah, this essentially takes place in haunted IKEA. We're following a main character, Amy, was that her name? It was. We're following our main character Amy, who works in Ors. She is very eager to move to a new store. She hates her manager, and the store itself has had a lot of weird goings on happening. The employees there are getting like random texts that say help throughout the day with like no idea who's sending them. When they open up the store after the following night, there's like stuff is trashed, there is poo all over the furniture, and they're like, how is this happening? So the manager Basil is basically says to Amy and another one of her colleagues, like, I will pay you some overtime if you stay overnight to help me like work out who's breaking into the store to like destroy it. So they stay overnight, and of course it's not someone breaking into the store to do it. it's because the store is haunted. So yeah, I really enjoyed the concept. I love the layout of the book itself. That I feel is what makes it so much fun, because it is like an IKEA catalogue. And you've also got a little bit of mixed media in there. You have pictures every so often of like the furniture that they sell in Orsk, and the further you get into the book, it becomes less the furniture that they sell and more the torture devices that the inhabitants of the store use. I really enjoyed it. I'm very excited to read more Grady Hendrix. I was very delightfully surprised not only by how scary it was and like gross and disgusting, but also how funny it was as well. So I'm very interested to read more of his books in the future. For my readathons, for Spookathon, I use it for the Bone White prompt, the 100+ years prompt, because the store is like 100+ years old, like the land it's on. I use it for Your Biggest Fear. Although I don't know really what my biggest fear is, I feel like definitely something that happened in this book would have fit that. And I also use it for the one-word title prompt. For Royal Readathon, I use it for the Oogie Boogie prompt, which was to read a book with a game or trials, and I felt like what happened to Amy and the other characters during the night kind of fits the trials theme. And I also use it for mental health rep, because the main characters do suffer from PTSD following the offence that they are subject to. And then for Gothtober, I use it for the multiple survivors prompt, because there are multiple survivors at the end of the book. Sorry if that is a bit of a spoiler. The next book that I read was Mooncakes by Wendy Xu, Suzanne Walker and Jamette Gill, which is another graphic novel, and this one was so cute. So the artwork in this is gorgeous, first of all. Second of all, the story is just so cute. So we are following two childhood friends who have been reunited, and they are kind of trying to defeat like a big bad, but it's mostly about their friendship and eventual romance that ensues as a result of them rekindling their friendship. I just thought it was so cute. It was so like comforting. I definitely feel like it's going to be a reread in the future. I just really enjoyed it. So I rated it 4 stars, mainly because the pacing was a little bit off, and I feel like it could have possibly been a duology rather than just one self-contained story. But I loved how diverse it was. So one of the characters, she is deaf and uses hearing aids. One of the other characters is non-binary. You've got gay grandmas in there. There's just so much diversity in it, and I just was like, oh my god, I was so delightfully surprised by it as well, and how casually it's like put in there, and it's not like a big deal isn't made out of it, but it's also not like just mentioned once and then never mentioned again. I just really loved that about it. But it was so cute. I really recommend this one, especially for the Halloween season, because it is very autumnal. It really got me into the mood for like Halloween and autumn. It was just so cute. It was so cute. So for Spookathon, I use it for the Trick or Treat prompt. This was the treat book. I use it for graphic novel. Potions, because potions do feature in this book. The main character and her grandmas run a like witch's bookshop / apothecary type thing. Like it's like a bookshop to like the normal people, and then anyone who's in the know can get like spell books from them and potions and stuff like that. I used it for the poll prompt, because I used a poll to pick the Trick or Treat books, and also for one-word title. For Royal Readathon, I used it for the Yzma prompt, for the Ursula prompt, and for LGBT, POC and disability rep. And for Gothtober, I used it for the betrayal prompt, because there is a little bit of a betrayal in here regarding the main plot. And I also use it for the read a BIPOC author prompt. And then I read Delicates by Brenna Thumler, which is the sequel to Sheets, and this was my trick book for the Trick or Treat prompt. It wasn't necessarily a trick, it was just the one that I was less excited to read at the time that I did the poll. This is like a historical graphic novel set in the 90s, where in the first book we follow our main character, who is dealing with the death of her mother, and she has to look after her family's laundrette and try and keep them afloat. Her dad is very depressed, and so she's kind of the one keeping the family together. Bear in mind she's only 12 years old, and she makes friends with this little ghost here called Wendell, and the two kind of work together to help her save her family's laundrette. This does follow on from that plot, but it's also very self-contained. We have started a new school year with Marjorie, and she is now with the popular group, and she is trying to keep up with the popular group because she finally has some friends. But she also like doesn't really agree with a lot of the things that they do and say. They shun ghosts and make fun of this other girl who is obsessed with ghosts, even though Marjorie's friend is a ghost, Wendell. And so it's very much a story of like bullying and sticking up for other people. This does deal quite heavily with suicide and thoughts of self-harm. Nothing graphic, but I would be very wary going into it. It was very upsetting. I read very upsetting parts of it while I was on my way to work, and I had to try really, really hard not to just start crying in the middle of the street because it was really sad, but it was also very, very touching. I rated it 4 stars if I didn't say already. I just felt like it's a little bit too immature for me. Like, it's weird because it's not quite middle grade, but it's also not quite young adult, and I feel like the topics that these 2 books now have dealt with are quite heavy and serious, but the main characters are also quite young and quite immature at times as well. So I kind of knocked off a star for that because I'm not 100% sure who it's like meant to be for, and it hasn't really got its voice in that way. But I really, really enjoyed the story itself. It was so, so touching and definitely one to pick up. I was a little bit skeptical because I enjoyed Sheets, but I didn't think it needed a sequel, and this is less of a sequel, more so of a companion novel. Like, it does follow on from the events of Sheets, and it will spoil Sheets for you if you read this on its own, but at the same time it's its own self-contained story. So I did really enjoy it. I loved the bullying storyline and like what they did with that. It was just so beautifully done, and the artwork in here as well. Like, I wasn't a fan of the artwork at first, but some of the scenery in here is just so gorgeous. I'm struggling to find a landscape page, but trust me, it's beautiful. So for my readathons for Spoopathon, I use this for the graphic novel prompts, for the trick or treat prompts because it was the trick book, and I also use it for one word title. For Royal Readathon, I use it for the Easma prompts, for mental health rep, and for POC rep. And I did not use it for any Gothtober prompts. It didn't quite fit into any of the ones that I hadn't fulfilled yet, so I didn't see the point of like reusing ones that I'd already completed. I then picked up Lore Olympus Volume 3 by Rachel Smythe, which is obviously the 3rd volume in the Lore Olympus graphic novel series. So this is the publication of a webtoon comic. There's not really much to say about the plot of this. It follows Hades and Persephone. It's like a retelling of that set in a modern day ancient Greece situation. It's still set in like Olympus, but they've all got like access to modern technology, and I really do quite like the setting of it all. But I also really, really love the art style. I just love how each of the gods has like their own like colour palette, and I just think it is so gorgeous the way Rachel like illustrates it. And the story itself is so cute. It's such a slow burn romance. We're following Persephone when she goes to college in Olympus, and then she starts working as an intern for Hades, and the 2 of them are so infatuated with each other, and it's just so painfully slow, but in a really, really nice way. I'm very excited for volume 4 because I feel like that's when the romance is really going to start turning it up a notch. I loved it. It was so gorgeous, such a beautiful continuation, and yeah, I know that I could read it for free online, but I just really enjoy reading it physically. There is just something about having it in these hardback editions that I just really, really love, and I'm just so excited to see more from Hades and Persephone in future volumes. I just love them. It's become a like new favourite series very quickly. I really kind of want to reread the first 3 all again, like really soon, even though I've only just read this one. Maybe when volume 4 comes out I will reread them in anticipation of that. It's nearly been about 12 months since I read volume 1, so maybe I'll reread them for volume 4. So for my readathons, I use this for the graphic novel prompt for Spoopathon, 100 plus years because Hades is more than 100 years old, and I also use it for 2022 release. For Royal Readathon, I use it for the Gaston prompt, which was to read a book with a sexy villain. Now I suppose you could say Hades is a villain traditionally, so that's what I've gone for with that, and also for the Hades prompt, obviously a book with mythology. And for Gothtober, I used it for a book I forgot about because I forgot that it was coming out in October. I forgot that I'd pre-ordered it, and I forgot that I wanted to read it during the month when it had arrived, so I feel like it counted for quite a lot of those. And also, if I didn't say already, I of course rated it 5 stars. I've rated all of the volumes so far 5 stars. I just absolutely love them. And the final book that I read in October was Mina and the Slayers by Amy McCoy. This is the sequel to Mina and the Undead, and I of course rated it 5 stars. I loved it. So I actually went into a little bit of a reading slump, I think towards the end of October, where I wasn't slumping in terms of what I was reading, I just wasn't in the mood to read, whereas when I was reading I was like, oh, I'm loving this, but then I would like put it down and not have the pull to pick anything up, which sucked because I could have read probably another book or 2 in the month if I hadn't felt that way. But I had to take it slow with this one, especially because it wasn't very well, still not very well, so I just kind of wanted to like lie on the sofa and hibernate, to be honest. But yes, so Mina and the Slayers is equal to Mina and the Undead. In the first book, we are following Mina, who goes to visit her sister for the summer in New Orleans. Her sister Libby is at university there, so she goes to visit. So during her time there are people being murdered, and they kind of all as a group, her sister and her sister's friends, trying to like solve the murder mystery. But also there are vampires, and it is great. So this is set in the 90s as well, and it has such a perfect 90s horror aesthetic. Amy is so good at setting the scene and making you really feel like you are in 90s New Orleans and feel like you are in like a horror slasher movie. I think she does a really good job as well of writing horror for a teenage audience, because these books are YA. You can tell that she's kind of having to hold herself back from being too graphic and gory, which obviously would not be suitable for teenagers. But I absolutely love this series. I loved this sequel. It kept me on the edge of my seat. I just can't wait to see what Amy writes next. I love the way that she has done vampires as well. I love vampire stories. I've seen so many different variations of vampires, and there are only so many new things that you can really do with them. But the way Amy has created her vampires in her own little universe, I just really, really love. Can't recommend this enough. Please, please, please pick up Mina and the Undead and Mina and the Slayers, because I love them. So for my readathons then, for Spoopathon, I use it for the Badass Weapons prompt and also the Next in a Series prompt. For Royal Readathon, I use it for the Hades prompt. I use it for LGBT rep and also BIPOC rep. And finally, for Gothtober, I use it for the Murder Mystery prompt, because this is like the epitome of a murder mystery. So that is 8 of the 9 books that I read in October. Obviously, I don't have Fairy Tale anymore. I had to go back to the library. I had a pretty good reading month, a lot of graphic novels. I'm hoping to get back into reading more of my full-length novels in November and December, because although I really enjoyed graphic novels, I'm a little bit fed up of them at the moment. I think I've graphic noveled myself out. But yeah, those are all of the books that I read. Let me know if you've read any of them, what you thought of them, or if I have intrigued you to any of these books and if you are thinking about picking them up. Okay, so that is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to give the video a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below what you read in October. If you haven't already and you would like to be, please do consider subscribing. I post a new video every single week. And I guess that's it. So I'll see you guys very soon with a new video. Bye!